Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. In the vast, star-studded expanse of the galaxy, peace had always been a fragile concept, held together by the thin threads of diplomacy and technology. The Interstellar Alliance, a conglomeration of star systems spanning countless light years, had once been the pinnacle of unity. Each system, regardless of species or origin, had a voice, a vote in the galactic network, the central hub of governance. Leaders were chosen not by bloodlines or conquest but by the will of the people, transmitted through the unbreakable web of technology. At least, that's what everyone believed. For years, the elections had run smoothly, and the alliance thrived. But beneath the surface, discontent simmered. The smaller systems felt overshadowed by the larger, more resource-rich ones. Trade routes were monopolized, and wealth flowed unequally. It was only a matter of time before that discontent found a voice, a dangerous one. And so, when the time came to elect a new leader, the galaxy held its collective breath. Two candidates stood out among the rest: General Ravo Kalar, a seasoned diplomat known for her commitment to peace, and Valandreth, a rising star from a lesser-known star system, whose fiery speeches about independence and self-reliance stirred both admiration and fear. The election was set to be a historic moment. Billions of citizens, connected across the stars, prepared to cast their votes. But in the shadows, a plan was already in motion. A group known only as the Phantom Dawn had been biding their time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Their target, the galactic network itself. The attack came without warning. As the final votes were tallied, the galactic network suddenly flickered, then went dark for a brief, terrifying moment. When it came back online, the results were clear. Valandrat had won by a landslide. The galaxy was stunned. The numbers didn't add up, but there was no time for investigation. Within hours of being sworn in, Drat made his first move. Standing before the grand holographic assembly, his image beamed across every star system, he announced that the alliance was over. "The era of unity is dead," he declared, his voice cold and resolute. "From this moment forward, each star system will stand alone. We will no longer bow to the will of a corrupt, bloated alliance. Independence for all." The shock waves were immediate. Star systems that had long depended on interstellar trade and cooperation were suddenly isolated. Diplomatic channels were severed, and the flow of resources ceased. Those who had benefited most from the alliance were plunged into chaos, while others, emboldened by Drat's words, prepared for war. Among the chaos, a lone figure sat in the cockpit of a small, weathered starship, watching the unraveling of the galaxy unfold on his screen. He was Callan, a mechanic and starship pilot who had spent his life maintaining ships for the Alliance's peacekeeping fleet. Now, as the universe around him collapsed into chaos, he found himself stranded on the outskirts of a crumbling star system. Callan stared at the screen, his heart heavy. He had seen the warning signs for years at the cracks in the system, the growing unrest. But he had never imagined it would come to this. The Alliance, once the beacon of hope and unity, was falling apart, and with it, the entire galaxy. He ran a hand through his short, dark hair, his mind racing. His home planet, now caught in the crossfire of the unfolding war, was no longer safe. His friends, his familia, they were all at risk. The starship he sat in, once a symbol of peace, now felt like a coffin drifting through the void. Callan's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of incoming transmission beeps. He glanced at the console, recognizing the signal code. It was Nara, an old friend and fellow pilot. Without hesitation, he accepted the call. "Callan, where are you?" Nara's voice was urgent, filled with the same fear that had gripped the galaxy. "On the edge of the Traxxas system," he replied. "What's going on? Have you heard?" "More than heard," she said, her voice tight. "I'm stuck in the middle of it. The fleets are mobilizing. Planets are turning into battlefields. It's a complete war zone out here." Callan's chest tightened. "We need to get out. The alliance is done, Nara. It's all falling apart." "I know, Nair said grimly. "That's why I'm calling you. There's a group of USA survivors, people who want to get away from this madness. We're trying to reach the outer rim, to find a place that's not caught in the war. We need someone like you, as someone who can keep our ships running." Callan hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had never been one to run from a fight, but this war a broken bar. It wasn't his fight. It wasn't anyone's fight. It was a massacre, and the longer they stayed, the more likely they were to be caught in the crossfire. "Where do you need me?" Callan asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "There's an old space station in the neutral zone, between the Velron and Sithis systems," Nair explained. "It's been abandoned for years, but there's a rumor that it still has a functional FTL ship. If we can get there, we can use it to escape the galaxy." Callan nodded, determination hardening in his chest. "I'm in. Send me the coordinates." The transmission ended, and Callan sat back, exhaling slowly. This was it. His chance to escape the madness, to find a way out. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be easy. The galaxy was at war, and getting to the space station would be a dangerous journey. Without wasting any more time, Callan powered up his ship's engines. The hum of the thrusters vibrated through the cockpit, and the stars outside the viewport blurred as the ship accelerated into the vast, chaotic void. As Callan's ship streaked through space, the scale of the conflict unfolding across the galaxy became painfully clear. Once bustling trade routes were now eerily silent, dotted with the wreckage of ships caught in the crossfire. Star systems that had thrived under the Alliance's protection were now battlegrounds, their surfaces scorched by orbital bombardment and the ceaseless exchange of high-tech weaponry. On the planets below, life had become a constant struggle for survival. Resources, once plentiful under the Alliance's shared system, were now scarce. Desperate factions, both large and small, fought over every scrap of fuel, every ounce of metal. Entire cities were leveled in the blink of an eye, reduced to smoldering ruins by the devastating power of the war machines unleashed upon them. Callan had seen enough of the devastation to know one thing: the Alliance was never coming back. The ideals of unity and cooperation that had once held the galaxy together were now just distant memories, shattered by greed, fear, and the hunger for power. As Callan navigated through the remnants of an asteroid field, his mind drifted to his own survival. He knew the journey to the neutral zone wouldn't be easy. With the collapse of the Alliance, the space between star systems had become a lawless wasteland, where pirates and mercenaries roamed freely, preying on any ship unlucky enough to cross their path. The warning lights on his console flashed suddenly, pulling Callan from his thoughts. His heart raced as the ship's sensors picked up multiple signals closing in on his position. "Pirates!" Callan cursed under his breath, his hands flying over the controls. His ship was fast, but it wasn't built for combat. He could outrun them, but only if he was smart about it. The pirates' ships appeared on his radar, small and agile, designed for quick strikes and fast escapes. They were gaining on him fast, their weapons systems locking onto his ship. Callan's pulse quickened as he plotted a course through the asteroid field, hoping to lose them in the dense, floating rocks. He pushed the thrusters to their limit, weaving through the asteroid field with practiced precision. The pirates followed, their ship starting between the asteroids, closing the gap with each passing second. Callan's eyes flicked to the readouts on his console. The pirate ships were too fast. He wasn't going to make it out of this unless he did something drastic. He glanced at the asteroid ahead, its surface pocked with deep craters. An idea formed in his mind, reckless and dangerous, but it was the only shot he had. With a deep breath, Callan adjusted his course, aiming straight for the asteroid. The pirates followed, their weapons locked onto his ship. At the last possible moment, Callan jerked the controls to the side, sending his ship into a sharp dive. The pirate ships, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, plowed into the asteroid's surface, their hulls shattering on impact. Callan exhaled in relief, his heart pounding in his chest. The danger had passed, But he knew it wouldn't be the last. The galaxy was a dangerous place now, and he was just one small ship in a sea of chaos. Callan adjusted his ship's trajectory, breathing heavily as the asteroid field faded behind him. The pirates had been close, too close, and he knew he couldn't afford many more encounters like that. The galaxy had turned into a violent place, where survival meant staying one step ahead of danger at every turn. His hands shook slightly as the adrenaline began to wear off, but there was no time to rest. He glanced at the coordinates Nera had sent him, recalculating his route toward the neutral zone and the abandoned space station that held their only hope of escape. The ship's autopilot hummed softly as it navigated the quiet, empty stretch of space. Callan leaned back in his seat, his mind drifting to thoughts of what lay ahead. He hadn't seen Nera in years, but their bond as pilots had always been strong. If anyone could lead a group through this chaos, it was her. He trusted her instincts and knew she wouldn't call him unless the situation was dire. The flashing console lights signaled an incoming transmission, pulling Callan from his thoughts. He hit the button, and Nera's face flickered onto the screen, her sharp features lined with stress. Behind her, the dim lights of a cramped ship interior illuminated several figures moving about. "We're getting close," Nera said, her voice tense. "But things are worse than we thought." "I picked up some chatter from nearby systems that there's a new faction emerging, one that's taking advantage of the chaos to seize power." Callan frowned. "Who are they?" "Not sure yet. But they're organized, well-armed, and ruthless. They're calling themselves the Crimson Pact. From what I can tell, they're sweeping through systems, taking control of what's left of the major trade hubs. They've already captured several planets, and their fleets are moving fast." "How close are they to us?" "They're still a few systems away, but they're expanding fast. If we don't get to that space station soon, we could be cut off." Callan's stomach tightened. The last thing they needed was another warlord rising from the ashes of the Alliance's collapse. The Crimson Pact sounded like trouble, the kind that wouldn't stop until they had seized control of every resource-rich planet in the galaxy. "I am on my way," Callan said, his voice steady. "We'll make it." Nera nodded, though her eyes remained tense. "Just be careful, Callan. The closer we get, the more dangerous it's going to be." The transmission ended, leaving Callan alone with his thoughts once again. He couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control faster than he could keep up. The galaxy had become a battlefield, and every passing moment felt like the ground beneath them was crumbling away. Hours passed as Callan's ship made its way toward the neutral zone. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of the ship's proximity alert. They were close. The space station loomed ahead, a massive, derelict structure floating in the emptiness. Its metal exterior was scarred and rusted, a relic of an era long gone. Callan guided his ship toward one of the docking bays, his eyes scanning the station for any signs of life. The place appeared abandoned, as Nera had promised, but something about the stillness unsettled him. He landed the ship with a soft thud, the docking bay's lights flickering to life as his engines powered down. He grabbed his toolkit from under the console and slung it over his shoulder before making his way out of the ship. The air inside the station was stale, thick with a smell of rust and decay. He could hear the faint hum of the station's power core struggling to keep the lights on. The rest of Nera's group was already there, waiting by one of the old cargo bays. Nera stood at the front, her arms crossed as she watched him approach. Behind her, a small crew of survivors. Some looked like seasoned pilots, others just scared civilians huddled together. They all wore the same expression, a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "You're late," Nera said, her tone light but her eyes serious. "Ran into some trouble on the way," Callan replied. "Pirates. But I lost them in the asteroid field." "Good," Nera said with a nod. "We've been scanning the station. It's mostly intact, but the FTL ship is in rough shape. We need you to take a look." Callan followed her into the cargo bay, where the rest of the group had gathered around an old, battered starship. It was larger than Callan had expected, a relic from a forgotten era of exploration. Its hull was covered in scorch marks, and several of its systems had clearly been scavenged for parts over the years. "She's seen better days," Nera said, gesturing to the ship. "But if we can get her up and running, she'll take us far away from here, somewhere the war can't reach us." Callan nodded, his eyes scanning the ship. It was a mess, but not beyond repair. The FTL drive would need serious work, but it was salvageable. If they could get the ship running, it could be their ticket out of the war zone. "I'll need some time," Callan said, pulling out his toolkit. "But I can get her flying again." As he worked on the ship, the station around them remained eerily quiet. The survivors kept watch, but there was an underlying tension in the air. They all knew that time was running out. The Crimson Pact was expanding, and it was only a matter of time before they reached this sector. Hours passed, and Callan lost himself in the familiar rhythm of repairs. His hands moved over the ship's damaged systems, rerouting power, replacing old wiring, and bringing life back into the ancient vessel. Slowly, the ship began to hum with renewed energy. But just as Callan was making progress, a distant rumble echoed through the station. He froze, his eyes flicking to Nera, who had gone pale. "What was that?" Callan asked, his heart pounding. Nera didn't answer right away, her gaze fixed on the far end of the cargo bay. "They've found us." Callan's blood ran cold. The Crimson Pact. Before they could react, the station's comms crackled to life, a distorted voice filling the air. "This is Commander Herrick of the Crimson Pact. The station is surrounded. Surrender now, and you may yet live." Nera cursed under her breath. "We need to move." Now. Callan scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. The ship was nearly ready, but they didn't have much time. The Crimson Pact's forces would breach the station any minute. He worked faster, sweat dripping down his forehead as he pushed the ship's systems to their limits. The others gathered around, tense and ready to fight if needed, though it was clear none of them wanted to face the Crimson Pact head-on. Their best chance was getting the ship operational and escaping before the enemy could break through. The rumble of footsteps echoed down the hallways as the Pact's forces drew closer. Callan could hear the distant hiss of their plasma rifles charging, the unmistakable sound of an impending battle. "Almost there," he muttered, his fingers moving rapidly over the control panel. The ship's engines roared to life, the power surging through the vessel. "Get everyone on board." Nera and the others wasted no time, rushing into the ship as Callan finished the final checks. The Crimson Pact soldiers were at the door now, their weapons raised as they prepared to storm the cargo bay. Callan slammed the control panel shut and darted for the ship's entrance just as the doors burst open behind him. Plasma fire filled the air, the bright blue bolts streaking past him as he dove inside the ship. "Go!" Nera shouted from the cockpit, her hands gripping the controls as the ship lifted off the ground. The docking bay doors slid open, revealing the vast, empty space beyond. Callan barely had time to strap himself into a seat as the ship rocketed out of the station, the Crimson Pact soldiers left behind in the chaos. The stars blurred around them as they accelerated away from the war-torn sector, the engines humming with renewed life. For a moment, there was silence, the weight of what they had just escaped settling over them. But Callan knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was still burning, and the Crimson Pact was still out there, hunting them. Nera glanced over at him, her expression grim but determined. "We made it." "For now," Callan nodded, though the tension in his chest remained. They had escaped the Crimson Pact this time, but the war was far from over. The galaxy had collapsed into chaos, and their survival would depend on staying one step ahead of the factions tearing it apart. As the ship's engines hummed beneath them, Callan stared out at the stars, wondering what kind of future awaited them in the unknown stretches of space. The Alliance was gone, but perhaps, somewhere out there, they could start again. Away from the war, away from the violence. But for now, all they could do was run.